Good evening. Sorry, not good evening. This is good afternoon. I am the loyal Hufflepuff. Not loyal Hufflepuff, Epileptic Explorer. And today we are going to continue our reading in Slaying the Giants in Your Life by Dr. David Jeremiah. This goes over all of different major obstacles that happen in your life, whether it's emotional, whether it's any type of fear, um, there are different obstacles that happen in life, and this next one coming up is resentment. There could be a lot of things about resentment. You could resent someone for saying something or doing something to you, or you can resent that person for all the wrong reasons, and you have no idea why they did it and what they did it for. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and start reading Slaying the Giants in Your Life. Leonard Holt was an old-fashioned company man. He had put in 19 years of hard work at the same Pennsylvania paper mill. When he wasn't on duty, there was a lab technician. You could find him in town leading a Boy Scout troop, or spending time with his children, or volunteering at the local fire brigade. Leonard was an active church member and all-around model citizen, the very embodiment of caring and community. Everyone in town admired Leonard, until the day he stuffed 2 pistols into his coat pockets, drove to the mill, and walked through the plant, methodically gunning down friends and coworkers of long standing. Before the attack had run its bloody course, Leonard Holt had fired 30 deadly bullets and left a number of casualties. The community could only respond in shocked bewilderment and grief. Why would their church leader, their scoutmaster, their loyal neighbor do such a thing? If a man like Leonard Holt was capable of this, then who could be trusted? It took some time to begin to understand the complex puzzle of Leonard Holt's meltdown. Detectives, friends, and neighbors began reassembling the pieces of a life that bolstered a town before tearing it to pieces. Who or what was the demon that had taken hold of Leonard Holt? As the people of the town talked, compared notes, and put all the pieces together, they saw a picture that had been there all along. They simply hadn't chosen to see it. There was something beneath all the hard work, neighborly smiles, and volunteerism. They found the demon, and its name was resentment. The key puzzle piece was Leonard's job. In 19 years at the mill, he had always given his best, yet there were men beneath him who had been promoted ahead of him. Nobody had paid much attention to Leonard's feelings about that, but now many of the promoted men were the very ones who lay buried in the cemetery. Another puzzle piece was provided by Leonard's carpool, of all things. Some co-workers had opted out of it because Leonard's driving was reckless and dangerous. Now it seemed clear that something had been eating away at him on the way to work, back home again, and probably all the hours in between. No one had suspected the demon of festering bitterness that had taken hold of the man's soul. After all, Leonard Holt was just another face in the crowd, a face that eventually appeared in Time magazine over this caption: responsible, respectable, resentful. Perhaps the best caricature of the power of resentment was penned by the author Charles Dickens in his novel Great Expectations. There we meet the immortal character Miss Havisham, jilted at the altar many years before. Long ago she was dressing for her wedding, awaiting for the hour of 9, when her groom would arrive and the blessed event would begin. The immense wedding cake, along with a sumptuous feast, lay in wait. At precisely 10 minutes before 9, a message had arrived. The groom would not be coming. He had run away with another woman. At that moment, time had ceased to move forward in the mansion of Miss Havisham. Every clock in the house registered 10 minutes to 9 from that day on. Neither did old Miss Havisham's wardrobe ever change. She still wore the wedding dress and the veil, now faded, yellowed with age and tattered. The windows of the ruined mansion stayed heavily draped so that sunshine might never enter. For decades, the cake and the feast had rotted on the tables, mostly carried off by rats and spiders. The rats could be heard moving behind the wall panels. Sharper teeth than those of the rats have been gnawing on me, said Miss Havisham. And of course she was right. The teeth of resentment cut sharp and deep, and can lay waste to the life that God designed as a feast and celebration of abundant living. Resentful souls draw the drapes and purposely block the sunshine. In the previous chapter, we explored the emotion of anger. Resentment is anger multiplied by time. It doesn't dissipate like anger, but lurks beneath the surface, undetected by any sonogram. Author Lewis B. Smedes wrote, we make believe we are at peace while the furies rage within, beneath the surface. There hidden and unsuppressed, our hate opens the subterranean faucets of venom that will eventually infect all of our relationships in ways we cannot predict. My good friend Gary Inrig, Dr. David Jeremias, by the way, has told the story of a man bitten by a dog, later discovered to be rabid. Hospital tests confirmed it. The man had contracted rabies. This was at a time when there was nothing much to be done after rabies had set in. No cure had been developed. The doctor had the bleak assignment of bringing the bad news to his patient. Sir, he said, everything possible will be done to make you comfortable, but we can't offer any false hope. My advice to you is to put your affairs in order as soon as possible. The dying man sank back in depression and shock, but finally he rallied enough strength to ask for a pen and paper, to begin writing furiously. An hour later, when the doctor returned, the man's pen was still flowing. The doctor said, well, it's good to see you've been taking my advice. That you've taken my advice. I take it you're working on your will? This ain't no will, Doc, said the man. It's a list of people I plan on biting before I die. The resentful are those who have been bitten and thus channel their energy into snapping at others. Resentment makes us permanently angry. It carves deep lines on our faces. It adds a heaviness to our varied steps. This is no way to live. Why do people choose it as a lifestyle? The Bible paints a detailed portrait of the malignant giant called resentment. Let's take a closer look. You won't find the word resentment in the concordance of your Bible. It's a modern term, but the idea is nothing new. Paul does use a phrase that comes very close to the meaning of it. We find it in a surprising place, and we discover it has a surprising meaning. It's found in 1 Corinthians 13, the classic chapter on love. As you may remember, Paul describes agape love like this. Love thinks no evil. Verse 5. The portion of that phrase that gives us thinks is the Greek word logizomai. Would be likely to guess where the word originated. It came from the bookkeepers. It actually means to calculate or reckon. The first century certified public accountant might be entering a tally into the ledger book, and he would calculate or reckon that he had a certain number of items. The word for this computation would be logizomai. So logizomai has to do with working over your ledger, making an entry in permanent ink. In the New Testament, this is generally a good thing. We're organized when we keep good records, but there are records we'd rather not see in the books. In Romans 4:8, Paul declares, "Blessed is the man to whom the Lord shall not impute sin." The idea is that God keeps a ledger book, and you're truly blessed if God has no entries beside your name. If you've committed yourself to Christ, of course, his blood has washed across the line with your name on it anyway. And yes, you're truly blessed and saved. In 2 Corinthians 5:19, we find God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself, not imputing their trespasses to them. He throws out the ledger book. For many of us, the image of God with such a book isn't a novel idea at all. Some people have the conception of God working away, recording every little sin. You need to know that he has removed your sin from you as far as the east is from the west. We deserve to have the book thrown at us, but instead it's thrown away for us. When it comes to your tax records, your business papers, and your household transactions, record keeping is highly recommended. But when it comes to the transactions we call relationships, we need to throw away the books. The practice of logizomai is poison when it comes to husbands and wives, parents and children, friends and companions. Love, Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 13, keeps no books. It posts no scoreboard. It makes no list of whom to bite. Love remembers to forget. Chrysostom, the leader of the 4th century church, once said that a wrong done against love is like a spark that falls into the sea and is quenched. Resentment douses the flames of life and love. It enshrines failure and evil, and it lets no one else forget. Here's an example of resentment. David, the textbook example of so many matters of the heart, is naturally a model of resentment as well. He was the man after God's own heart, but he had many failures. On his deathbed, King David brought his son Solomon into the room for final counsel. In 1 Kings 2, 5-6, we have a record of their words. Moreover, you know also that what Joab the son of Zeruiah did to me, and what he did to the 2 commanders of the armies of Israel, to Abner the son of Ner and Amasa the son of Jether, whom he killed. And he shed the blood of war in peacetime, and put the blood of war in his belt that was around his waist, and on his sandals there that were on his feet. Therefore do according to your wisdom, and do not let his gray hair go down to the grave in peace. Think of this, the greatest man of his time in all the world, preparing to meet his God, and what wisdom does he share? An old grudge dating back many years, an item from the mental ledger of a king, and the generational perpetuation of a character flaw. For David is passing a legacy of vengeance on his son, the same son he wants to be a wise and godly king. Don't let Joab die naturally, whatever you do, he is saying. See that he pays his life for the pain he caused me. This is the side of David we'd rather not see. Perhaps it's a side of ourselves we'd rather not face. Resentment is an ugly, deformed creature. Poet Stephen Crane described it this way. In the desert, I saw a creature, naked, bestial, who, squatting upon the ground, held his heart in his hands, and ate of it. I said, "Is it good, friend?" "It is bitter, bitter, bitter," he answered. "But I like it, because it is bitter, and because it is my heart." Too many people become that ugly, stooped character, eating away at their hearts and believing they like the taste. But what they don't realize is that the resentment inside them doesn't stay the same. It's actually more like a cancer that takes hold, then takes charge. As Helen Grace Lashid has written, it grows. It distorts reality. It keeps us chained to the past. Like bad air, it pollutes not just the bitter person, but those who come in contact with the person. A chain, a cancer, an ugly little creature, poisoned air. Bitterness and resentment are described through many word pictures, but perhaps the most enduring is the one found in Hebrews 12:15. It is a metaphor of the malignant weed, looking diligently lest anyone fall short of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up cause trouble, and by this many become defiled. And emphasis was added. Ask any gardener about weeds. The gardener will tell you that once weeds take hold, they can be very difficult to drive out. Weeds will move in and choke away the beautiful grass and flowers that are intended for this plot of land. That's exactly what resentment does. Let me have my bitterness, someone might say. It's nobody's business but my own. Why not ignore that stray weed? If you don't look too closely, it can pass for grass. The answer, of course, is that both of these spread out and poison their environment. Your bitterness against an ex husband or the boss at work will color all your relationships. It will spread into your marriage, your friendships, even your relationship with God. It chokes out whatever it touches. Psychologists tell us that the weed of bitterness is cultivated at great price. When we choose to hold on to our resentment, we relinquish control of our future. We trade the freshness of the new day and all its responsibilities for the pain of the past. Quite often, we eat away our hearts, one bite at a time, over someone who may be far away and totally unaware of our thoughts, totally forgetful of what happened, and certainly totally unaffected by anything we're thinking or doing. Resentment, someone said, is swallowing poison and waiting for the other person to die. We've jeopardized not only our spiritual, but our physical health. As a matter of fact, Dick Innes has written about a doctor whose patient was suffering through all kinds of symptoms: stress, ulcers, high blood pressure. If you don't cut out your resentments, said the doctor to the shocked patient, I may have to cut out part of your intestinal tract. That got the man's attention. He went home and cut way down to his on his resentment intake, making every arrangement possible to get his relationships and feelings in order. During his next appointment, the doctor was able to tell him that his condition had cleared up. He was now a healthy man. When we opt to cling to bitterness, it's as if we've placed ourselves under an evil spell. Only the ancient and godly remedy of forgiveness will remove that spell. In our time, the definite book on that subject is by Lewis Smedes, who gave us the classic Forgive and Forget. Smedes recounts a play that illustrates the power of resentment. This play is the story of a German general and a French journalist. Hermann Engel, the captured general, is sentenced to 30 years imprisonment by the Nuremberg court after the Second World War. Morio, the journalist, is infuriated. His family was massacred by Engel's troops during the war, and he wants Engel to pay with his life, not with a prison sentence. For 30 long years, he performs his own ritual death penalty in the execution chamber of his heart. Again and again, he lives for nothing in the world other than the day when he can carry out the punishment in real life. The old general, Engel, survives his long years of imprisonment and emerges a tired and broken man. He wants only to be left alone and to be forgotten, so he and his wife build a cabin in the woods near Alsace. There they intend to live out their remaining years, quietly and inconspicuously, but they don't know that Morio was followed has followed the couple's movements. He's in the nearby village, trying to incite a mob of fanatics to rise up and take vengeance against the old Nazi. Their plan is to come by night, burn the cabin, and shoot Engel and his wife. But there is one piece of unfinished business. Morio, being a journalist, has always wanted to know more about what actually happened to his family's community. He decides to pay a visit to the Engels on the day before their death, just to ask a few questions. Morio visits the shaken Engel and begins to question him about every massacre, every atrocity. But he isn't prepared for the feeble old man he encounters, the one who struggles to recall old details. The man isn't a monster at all, merely a broken old man in the winter of life, waiting to die. Morio isn't as angry as he thought, not after his face-to-face encounter. Suddenly he blurts out all the mob's plans for the next day. He offers to lead them out of the woods and save their lives. Engel listens and replies, I'll go with you on one condition. I'll go with you if you'll forgive me. Morio hesitates. This is a difficult question for a man who has built his entire life around the hope of destroying his adversary. He has killed the old German in his heart many times over 3 decades. Amazingly, Morio discovers that he's perfectly capable of rescuing his old enemy. He's more than willing to call off the execution. But forgive him? That he cannot do. The Ingalls don't leave, and the next evening, they die at the hands of a rabid mob. We're left with this enigma. Why is it easier to forgive with our hands than with our hearts? Why is a man capable of rescuing another man, but incapable of forgiving him? The answer is that bitterness is a cancer. It takes root so deeply that it can't be quickly extracted. Its teeth have sunk too deep. You can begin by nurturing a minor grudge, and if you feed it, the grudge grows into a powerful resentment. By then, it has a life of its own, and you can't help continuing to feed it, to nurture it. Ultimately, it's no longer something you own. It's something that owns you. Your entire life is defined and ordered around the principles of hatred. None of us want to live that way. If we could see it in advance, we'd do almost anything to avoid falling under the demonic spell of resentment. What can we do? How can we resist? Here are the 5 steps to resisting resentment. Number 1, think it through. Why do most people harbor resentment against others? The answer may surprise you. Doctors believe that resentment affords people a sense of superiority over the people they resent. Hanging on to that person's misdeed makes them seem lower and the bitter person higher. It's clear that people who tend to think little of themselves are the ones who gravitate towards resentment. For it gives them a way, an unhealthy way, to place themselves a little higher on the pecking order. Resentment places an angry individual in the judge's seat, pounding the gavel. It makes him the fury and the executioner too. There's a sense of power in fantasizing the execution of what seems, in our imagination at least, to be justice. With every new episode of our inner fantasies, the story grows better. The antagonists grow more evil. The punishment becomes more dramatic. That person gets what's coming to him. Someone has said that our fantasies of bitterness bring about neurotic pleasure and religious pride. In our minds, at least, we're both high and mighty. The first thing to do, then, is to simply think it through. Is this the kind of life you'd like to lead? Is this the direction in which you'd like to project your thoughts? Is this a fitting use of your emotional energy? A little rational thought will cure a great deal of misplaced resentment. Number 2, write it down. One of the most useful gifts God gave us is the talent to operate a pen on paper. We can use it in prayer. We can use it to preserve memories. We can use it to encourage others. We can also use it to organize our thoughts and feelings. It's interesting to try getting to the bottom of a feud. Historians have long been fascinated by the famous feud between the Hatfield and McCoy clans. It was a bloody battle between two families set against a mountain backdrop, and it went on for generations and at the expense of many lives. Yet no one was ever very clear about what set the feud off. Everyone had a different story. There was nothing ambiguous, however, about the result of the feud. One of the two original patriarchs, old Randall McCoy, lost 5 of his children, all of them gunned down. He was driven almost completely mad by grief and was known to walk the streets of Pikeville, West Virginia, telling and retelling the story of the feud to whoever would listen. His counterpart, Devil Anz Hatfield, struggled with guilt and remorse over the feud, despite his name, Devil Anz, finally turned to God. Put away his bitterness and was baptized in the waters of Island Creek. Sometimes we're willing to fight to the death for a cause we can no longer articulate. If we ever could, if we ever could in the first place, there are families that perpetuate ill feelings long after the causes are forgotten and the original antagonists are dead. That's why the best thing for you to do is to write it down. Bring those feelings out. Put them on paper before you. Get a good look at them in the light. You may be surprised by what you see. It could be that this thing, this person, this situation isn't all worth the emotional energy you've expended. All too often, the enemies of our emotional landscapes know not what they do. Words have a way of bringing precision to vague and amorphous feelings. They crystallize our thoughts and show us what lies beneath. The situation is like the little boy who is afraid of the dark. There's something peeking out of the closet door at him, and it seems more and more terrible each night. But when his parents show it to him in the light, it turns out to be nothing but his old coat, the one with Big Bird on it. Who could get worked up over a Big Bird coat? That's the way it is when you bring your bitterness out of the dark and into the light. The very best way for us to do that is to write it down, carefully, honestly. Charlie Shedd and his wife had a great altercation, and he left the house. When he returned, a note on the refrigerator said, "Dear Charlie, I hate you. Love, Martha." Be that honest. Begin your essay. I am filled with resentment because, then add every detail, and when you've finished, read your essay aloud. Return and read it again. Are you still resentful? Number 3, work it out. A couple managed to stay married for 50 years. At the anniversary party, someone asked for their secret. The husband said, "We made a simple agreement when we were married. Whenever she was bothered about something, she would go ahead, tell me off, and get it out of her system. As for me, every time I got angry, I should go out and take a walk." He concluded, "I guess you can attribute our marital success to the fact that I've largely led an outdoor life." Actually, he does have a point. There's something to be said for good physical exercise. There is no full psychological solution to what is a spiritual problem. Let's be very clear on that. But a little perspiration is beneficial for strong emotions. It takes the edge off fresh anger. It provides an outlet. It becomes an escape valve so that we don't build up a backlog of bitterness. Don't sit in a dark room and brood. Go out and take a vigorous walk. Sweat away some of your emotions. Number 4, talk it over. You can discuss your feelings with trusted friends. You can discuss them with your family. But please don't fail to talk your feelings over the one who loves you most, and the one who has the power to make you, your mind, and your heart brand new. Go to the Lord and tell it all. Bring that essay with you. No matter how many pages it took you to write, even if it's the size of War and Peace, that's okay. The Lord never slumbers. He'll listen to every word. Be just as honest with God as you were on paper. That's hard for some people who put on their emotional Sunday best before approaching God in prayer. It's good to acknowledge His holiness, but it's also important to be authentic in prayer. If you're furious, remorseful, frantic, sorrowful, whatever emotion you may have, bring it to God. Come as you are. It's not as if you can hide anything from Him anyway. There's no hair on your head He doesn't know. No molecule within the marvel of your body that He didn't place there. Share it all with Him, and He'll begin to share certain things with you. Things such as grace and forgiveness. Hebrews 12:15, as we've seen, offers a compelling phrase. Look diligently, carefully, lest anyone fall short of the grace of God. What does that mean? Those with resentment in their hearts are coping with a grace deficiency. They need to approach God and recover what they've lost, for He is the only true source. To experience His grace and forgiveness is to find that He that we have plenty of it for others. Otherwise, we'll continue to play by the world's rules. We'll continue to keep our ledgers and tally up every little hurtful word and deed we perceive someone has aimed our way. There is a story of two men who were traveling through the jungles in Burma, one a visitor and the other a resident missionary. Along their journey, they came to a murky little pond, and the waters came up to their necks as they crossed it. When the two men emerged on the far side, the visitor was covered with leeches all over his arms, his legs, and his torso. He began frantically plucking at the parasites, trying to pull them off, but the missionary said, "No, don't do that. If you pull one out suddenly, a part of the creature will remain under your skin. The wound will become infected and you'll be in much worse condition." The other man said, "Then what am I supposed to do?" "We need to get you into a balsam bath as quickly as possible," said the missionary. "Soaking yourself in the bath will cause those leeches to pull out their hooks, and you'll be free." Deep resentment is the leech that embeds itself in your heart. You can't pluck at it and discard it simply by making a resolution, reading a book, or any other simple action. You know from experience it's going to take more than that. Those feelings have their hooks in you. But there is one thing you can do, and that's to bathe in the luxurious grace of God. When you do that, a lot of strongholds begin to loosen within your spirit. When you contemplate the forgiveness He has given you, your merciless grudges begin to fade into nothing. When you feel the wonders of His cleansing grace, you settle down into the bath until the waters rise up and overflow. They begin to soak all of those around you, your antagonists and rivals and enemies. Suddenly, the thing you resented doesn't seem worthy of notice anymore. It simply comes down to this: we can forgive because God has forgiven us. If you haven't accepted God's forgiveness for your sin, you'll struggle to forgive others. You'll know no way other than the strict rule of the ledger book. But if you've found the way of grace, you'll find how delightful and rewarding life can be when you stop keeping score. Talk to God. Ask Him to help you see the depth of His love, His mercy, His grace, and forgiveness. Ask Him to fill your cup with it. Then spend some time expressing your thanksgiving to Him for doing so. I have a feeling that after doing so, the spell will be broken. You won't feel at the mercy of mercilessness any longer. And yet there's one more thing you should do. Number 5, give it up. Always remember to forget. 2 little boys had a quarrel as they were playing catch with a ball and glove. Johnny slammed the kitchen door and told his mother he'd never have anything to do with Bobby again. And yet the next day, there he was on the way out the door with his ball and glove. "I'll be over at Bobby's," he said. "I thought you were through with Bobby forever," said his mother. Johnny said, "Oh, me? Oh, me and Bobby are good forgetters." Be a genius, detailed forgetter. Maybe you've seen an emotional pack rat. But now it's time to get the jumbo-sized garage bag and clear everything out of your memory. A little selective amnesia never hurt anyone. It actually saves a lot of misery. If you're angry at your boss, it is as if you're carrying him on your back. Everywhere you go, if you're angry at your mother-in-law, she's up there too. How many people can you carry on that back? After a while, the burden becomes heavy. It's so much easier to walk if you simply let it all go. There is only one portion of the Lord's Prayer that is repeated, and it's the part about forgiveness. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Then at the end of the prayer, we find this statement: if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. Matthew 6:14 through 15. As you approach the Father, unburden yourself of those grudges. As you finish your prayer and go into the world, unburden yourself again. Travel light, and you'll enjoy the journey for the first time. It's the only way to travel. After all, that's the identifying mark of the children of God. People who bless their enemies, who return grace for evil, who never fight for the best position but look for the neediest recipient. Against all odds, God has turned the scales of justice upside down and found a way to forgive us. That allows beautiful fellowship between you and God, and between you and others. Wouldn't you like to live under that rule of grace and forgiveness? Don't you long to simply let go? Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God in Christ also forgave you. Ephesians 4:32. I consider Corrie ten Boom, Dr. David Jeremiah, by the way, one of the most remarkable Christians of the 20th century. Her life has always fascinated and inspired me. It wasn't long that I, Dr. David Jeremiah, had the privilege of traveling through her homeland and seeing where she grew up. You may remember that she and her family paid a high price for sheltering Jews in their home during the Nazi persecution. She and her sister were imprisoned at Ravensbrück, where her sister died. Her father died in another concentration camp. When she was released, she had no family. She decided that the world would become her family. The atrocities of the Germans had been tragic enough, but in Corrie's estimation, the sin of resentment on the part of the survivors would only perpetuate the tragedy through generations to come. Somewhere, it all has to end. Someone has to say, no more. So she set out to travel everywhere she could and preach grace, forgiveness, and voluntary forgetfulness. One Sunday morning, Corrie ten Boom was speaking in Munich. She quickly recognized the man who was walking to the front of the auditorium to greet her. How could she forget such a man? He was the very guard who'd made the women shower as he watched, ogling and taunting them. He had also been savagely cruel to Corrie's sister Betsy. He had played a part in her death. Now that very man stood before her, but he clearly didn't recognize her. He said, "Fräulein, it is wonderful that Jesus forgives all our sins. It is just as you say. You mentioned Ravensbrück. I was a guard there, but I have become a Christian since those days. I know that God has forgiven me, but I would like to hear it from you as well. Fräulein, will you forgive me?" Like the French journalist Moreau, Corrie stood there, paralyzed by the word forgive. In her mind, this man was a monster. Something within her said that she couldn't forgive. He had filled her with shame and misery every day. He was the instigator of a lengthy, unthinkable nightmare. Betsy, her precious sister, had died at his hands. Yet now she felt deep remorse about herself and her faith. How could she preach so fervently about something that, right here on the spot, she couldn't practice herself? She could think of only one thing to do. She looked up to heaven and prayed silently. "Forgive me, Father, for my inability to forgive." Immediately, things began to change. She began to feel the powerful sensation of God's forgiveness moving through her. She couldn't remember later how it happened, but she felt her hand surge toward the clasp of the hand of the old guard, and she clutched it firmly and said, "You are forgiven." The man was set free, but even more on that day, Corrie ten Boom herself was set free. She felt the burden of resentment fall away from her shoulders. Life is so much easier when we allow God to do this for us. The world is so much brighter, its colors so much more vivid. The world filled with so much more joy when we're not blinded by petty resentment. It's a lesson our world never learns. Resentment causes families to break apart, communities to be torn by violence, nations to remain at war for generations. It injects its teeth into countless souls of those who walk among us, so that lives that might have been productive, lives that might have been a blessing, become consumed by a self-destructive hatred. It keeps us from knowing the goodness of God. It keeps us from being faithful parents, faithful children, good neighbors. We need not live this way. We must not live this way. All we need to do is ask God to free us from the chains of the ledger book. We began by recalling a story by Charles Dickens. In another of that same author's tales, a man named Ebenezer Scrooge has become twisted by every manner of resentment of his father, of his fiancée, of everyone and everything. Then the ghost of his old friend Jacob Marley comes for a visit on Christmas Eve. Do you remember the distinctive thing about Marley's apparel? His leg was chained to a long string of ledger books, logizomai, and he tells Scrooge that even now, in an invisible ledger, every bit as long is attached to Scrooge's own leg, and every day it's becoming longer and impeding his progress even more. How many ledgers are you carrying around with you? Won't you allow Christ to cut them away for good? Throw away the book. Walk free and light-hearted. You'll live in the atmosphere of grace and joy you never thought possible. Resist your resentment. Banish every trace of bitterness. Live by the liberating law of grace. And remember to forget. There are moments in our lives that, like I've mentioned before, that go over that we would resent someone for doing what they said, or someone that didn't do or help you out in a sticky situation. If you look at Corey ten Boom, I've read The Hiding Place, and she goes through a lot of stuff. She goes through hunger. She struggles with her faith in God. She's struggled so much that she thought she was going to die in the concentration camp. From beginning to end, you see that faith grow, and at the end of the book, you see that what you just saw, that guard asking for forgiveness. You may be stuck, if you're resentful right now, you're stuck in that prison. You are chained to a wall because you do not want to hold back any of that resentment to someone. It could be a previous president. It could be a current president. It could be a celebrity. It could be, like the book said, your boss. It could even be a best friend. It could be a friend that hurt you in the past and you resent them for it. It's time to let go of it. If you're not a Christian today and you hold that resentment on that person, maybe it's time for you to let go of that resentment that you're holding onto. Give it to God. Pray about it. Give it to God and let Him deal with it. That's why He's there. That's why He's there for you. That's why He's there to open that door for you, to give you an opportunity to let go of that resentment. You will feel so much better and lighter about letting go of that resentment in your life. If you keep on resenting because of what someone did to you, or of something that happened to you, let it go. Let it go. It is in the past. Let it go and don't ever hold on to it. Please, oh please, if you are a believer and you still hold resentment to someone, remember to let go and let God. Even as Christians, we struggle with this. There are people out there that we resent because they pass us up. I've been working as a custodial for different for two different schools now, two different churches. I have worked at a movie theater, and there are moments where I thought I was going to get a promotion. The current custodial position I have right now, I am growing, and it is beginning better. But there have been times where I couldn't do as, like, there are jobs I had to do because no one else was going to do it. In a movie theater, I had people around me help, like, I wasn't the only one doing a movie auditorium, even with a big mess. I was working with a team. We communicated. We did so much, and I grew so much with that job, but I never got support or the opportunity to get promoted. It's difficult to pray about something like that, but you also have to think about situations. Like, why does God put you in this situation where you resent this person? It's because God is testing you to see how long it will take for you as a person to let go of that resentment. If someone is bothering you, either one, go up to them or get counsel from someone else. I have been in those situations. Neither option is easy. The key to all of it is being open. Be open to someone that you can trust, or be open to someone that is bothering you. If you keep on letting them bother you, you're going to learn to resent them. You're going to learn to hate them. You're going to learn to just imagine them being dead. If you want to I am asking you guys, please don't hold on to that resentment. Give it to God. Let him take that load off, that huge backpack that you've got on your back. Let it go. Just let go of that burden. Let it fall into that tomb where Christ laid. Let that burden fall at the cross. And give it to God. Let it go and give it to God. That's all you have to do. If you want that, if you're not a believer and you want that right now, you want to take that load off, I'm going to lead you in a prayer. You don't have to copy me. You can say your own prayer after this video. But I ask you to please not be resentful of anyone or even be resentful of yourself. And I pray that you guys open your hearts to God, that you let God, who is knocking at the door of your heart, open that door for you. I'll go ahead and pray, and I hope you'll follow suit. All right. If you guys are praying after me, please repeat, Dear Jesus, I know I'm a sinner. I know there is nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do that will make me perfect, that will make me saved from sin. Thank you for sending Jesus to die on a cross to pay for my sin and from rising from the grave. Thank you for paying for my sins, and from this day forward, I choose to follow you all the days of my life. Thank you for saving me, and in Jesus' name, amen. You can even add any sin that you have and pray in that prayer as well. But if you prayed that prayer with me, welcome to the family of God, and I hope to one day meet you And if you liked this video, and if you want to leave a comment, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel for more videos. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Until then, I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.